What's up guys, Justin here with the CGEssentials.com. So in today's video, we're going to talk about how to create a sliced, stylized terrain inside of Blender. Let's go ahead and just jump into it. And so this is actually a method I saw in one of the Blender presentations. This is Ahmed Alajili. Hopefully I said that right. And he does a great presentation on using Blender in architectural design. One of the things he shows is how to create this sliced terrain. And so I wanted to make a video showing you how to make this effect because this is a really cool kind of practical effect, especially for architectural applications. So let's go ahead and jump into Blender. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to use the built-in ant landscapes. You can enable that by going to preferences, add-ons, and then a.n.t landscape, and you just want to enable that. And we're going to use that in order to create our terrain. There's other ways to do this as well, but we're going to do a Shift A, go into Mesh, and we're going to add a landscape. Remember that this has a bunch of different presets built in. Well, in this case, I'm going to use the canyon preset right here. And so that's going to generate a fairly simple canyon that we can use. So we're going to go ahead and be done with that. And I'm going to go ahead and scale this up a bit because it's a little bit small, right? So I'm going to scale it up again. One thing you do want to make sure that you do whenever you're scaling all these things up is you want to make sure that you've applied your rotation and scale. Otherwise, you're going to get some weird results with your modifiers. But first thing we want to do is we want to take this object and make it solid, right? So that's pretty easy to do. We're just going to tab into edit mode and then do an E and a Z in order to extrude it down. We just want to make sure that we've extruded it far enough down that it's below the bottom here. So something like this, we can adjust it in a second. And then all we want to do is just scale it to 0. So we're going to do an S0. So we're going to do an SZ, and then type in a value for 0. And so that is going to give us a solid shape, just like this. So now we're in good shape to kind of start working with this. And so what we need to do is we need to start off by creating a plane that we can use in order to intersect with our terrain, right? So I'm just going to do a Shift A. We're going to add a plane. And I'm going to scale it up so that it's slightly bigger than the terrain that we've got right here. And just remember that whatever height you set this at is where your effect is going to start. So I'm going to make sure that I've got it set so it's below the actual terrain area right here. And again, remember to apply your rotation and scale, otherwise this isn't going to work. And so now what we want to do is we're going to take this and we're going to use it to create something that we can actually intersect with this terrain. And so to do that, I'm just going to go into my modifiers. I'm going to start by adding an array modifier. And so when I add an array modifier, what that's going to do is that's going to create a copy of this plane. Well, in this case, we don't want this to be going off to the side. We want it to be going up. And I generally find that the constant offset is working better for this. So I want to set this constant offset. I'm going to set my distance X to 0. I'm going to set my distance Z to whatever I want the thickness of my slices to be. We'll go ahead and start with 5 feet. That actually might be a little bit much. Maybe we'll go with like 2 feet. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use this in order to create a number of different copies that intersect with this model, right? So if I drag this up, notice how it's creating copies of this plane right here. And if you look at this from the side, you can kind of see where those copies are going to be and how thick your slices are going to be. And we'll talk more about using this to control the distance in a minute. But now what I want to do is I want to take this and I want to make it so that these planes are only showing up where my terrain is, right? Because we have too much material right now. So what we want to do is we want to add a new modifier. We want to add a boolean modifier. So what the boolean modifier is going to do is it's going to allow us to use the terrain to remove material. So what I want to do is I want to go down to the boolean modifier and I want to use the eyedropper and I want to select my landscape right here. And so when I do that, and note that your computer speed is going to affect how quickly this works. But when I do that, at the moment, nothing is happening, right? And so the reason why is this is set to be a difference. Well, we don't want this to be a difference. We want this to be an intersect. And when we click on intersect, what that's going to do is that's going to set these objects so that they only show up where they intersect with this terrain, right? And so if I was to toggle my terrain off, right here, notice how I'm getting a little bit of an idea of how that might look, but it doesn't look especially good right now. There are some things we want to do in order to adjust this. And so remember that what this is doing is this is going through and for each one of these array objects, it's basically giving us the intersection point of that object with our surface, right? Well, now once we've created each one of those pieces, because right now they're in here as flat pieces, what we want to do is we want to solidify them, right? So we've created a bunch of slices. Now we want to add a solidify modifier down below. And so when we add that solidify modifier, what that's going to do is that's going to come in here and give thickness to each one of our slices. However, at the moment, right, it's not really doing very much. We need to give our thickness, or we need to adjust our thickness. And so really the best way that I've found to do this is you want to set your thickness to whatever your offset is over here. That's why it's important that we use the constant offset instead of the relative offset. So what I want to do is I want to set this to 2 feet, like this. And so when I set this to 2 feet, first off, you're going to notice that this runs a little bit slow because it's dealing with a lot of mesh data right here. So with your slower computer, you might even be waiting even more. Just remember, the more slices that you have in here, the more this is going to happen. All right, so you might have noticed that we're getting kind of a funky result in here. There's an easy way to fix this, and that is with our Boolean modifier, we've got it set to the wrong solver. So for what we want to do right here, we don't want this set to exact. We want this set to fast. So we're going to go into our Boolean modifier, switch this over to fast mode right here. Well, when we switch this over to fast mode, notice how now we're getting those slices inside of our scene, just like this. All right, and so sometimes you might get a little bit of a funky result in here where gaps are being left out for whatever reason. I've found that all you really need to do in order to fix that is just take your original plane that's right here and just do a G and a Z. And you may want to think about turning your modifier off depending on the speed of your computer. But if you move this up and down a little bit, so I just moved that initial plane, right, up and down just a little bit, it usually fixes any gaps that you have in here. Now, a couple things about this. So first off, if you wanted to, you could adjust this so that your offset is smaller and make your slices smaller, right? So I could set my display offset to 1 foot instead of 2 feet, like this. And then notice how I'm getting thinner slices in here. Now the problem with that is depending on the performance of your machine, right? This is just more math that this has to do. So I could definitely set this to 1 foot or even like half a foot, something like that, in order to get smaller and smaller slices. And that's definitely a valid option. Just make sure that your machine is actually up to doing this, right? Because remember, to make up that whole height, you're going to have more slices in here. So with a slower computer, this maybe won't work as well as with a faster computer. But it's definitely an option, and it does give you a better result. So another thing is how you view this. And so I found that you can actually view this better by clicking on the drop down and turning on cavity right here. That's going to highlight the edges of these slices a lot better. So it's going to give you a much better view in here. And then one other thing you can do with this as well is you can right click on this. You don't want to click on shade smooth because that's just going to smooth everything in here. That's not really going to be a good look, right? It's just going to look kind of like blobby, like clouds, but you can toggle on the auto smooth. And so what you can do though is you can go over into your normal settings under your mesh data right here. So under your object data properties, you can go under your normals and you can set what is being auto smoothed by number of degrees. So if I bring this down to like 15 degrees or something like that, notice how it's going to highlight more of these edges in here. It does take a little while in order for it to do that. So you can use that in order to set how smooth these objects are inside of Blender. All right, so then from there, there's a ton of stuff you could do with this. You could start dropping models in here. You could put like a water plane in here and start rendering this out. One thing to note is if you do want to export this to any other program as like actual topology, you would have to come in here and apply these in order to finalize this. As soon as you apply those modifiers though, you lose the ability to make any adjustments. So maybe like save another copy or something like that before you do that. All right, so leave a comment below. Let me know if you have any questions about anything we talked about. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks, guys.